So let's talk about a whole bunch of Nintendo Switch news because there is a lot of Nintendo Switch news out there that I really do want to cover. Not everything in this episode is going to be Nintendo Switch related, but 99% of the stuff that I'm about to talk about in this episode is going to be Switch related stuff. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right down to business with today's episode. First of all, I am going to be talking about two new updates for two very popular games. I don't normally cover game updates on my channel all too often, but I really wanted to cover this since they are kind of important and they are something to actually talk about. Now, the first update is going to be for Super Mario Maker 2. Super Mario Maker 2 is actually getting another update. If you read here from Nintendo of America, it does say the final major update. Keep in mind, it does not say the final update. It says the final major update. So that does mean in the future, of course, they can add little patches to like clean up the gameplay or add little things here and there. But for big things, for the most part, this is pretty much, you can kind of call it the final update actually, even though it's not technically the final update just because the way they word it, it says final major update, not final update. But it's still better than nothing, and it is nice. Mario Maker is getting more content. It's actually kind of sad that this is actually like the big last update for Mario Maker 2, just because I think compared to Mario Maker 1, there was more updates to that game, but this game really didn't get all too many updates. I think this is like only the second update to Mario Maker 2, but I guess you have to remember they took all the assets from Mario Maker 1, put them into Mario Maker 2, and when Mario Maker 2 actually came out, they actually added a whole bunch of brand new features into Mario Maker 2 at launch when this game came out that wasn't originally in the original game. So there is still a lot of content that's already in this game that makes this game much more better than Mario Maker 1. I think for Mario Maker fans or Mario 2D fans, I think you're going to have a lot to actually discover and to actually create, and you're going to have a lot to do in this game now that this update's out, and just all the past updates or all the stuff that's currently in Mario Maker. So let's go ahead and briefly talk about this update. I'm just going to skim over stuff since you may have already seen some of the stuff that's in this update specifically. So most of the stuff in this update are just going to be little things that add items to the game. Like for instance, one thing they are doing here is they're going to make some items in the game make you feel like you're playing Super Mario 2, which I know some people out there actually wanted a Super Mario 2 theme, which there is no theme, so you can't make levels based off of Mario 2, which is kind of sad. But at least now with these items in the game, you'll be able to feel like you're actually playing Mario 2, which is actually very nice, because like I said, we were missing that art style for quite some time, so it's nice they're finally bringing that back. And then for the most part, they did actually just give us little items here and there to actually mess with, which is actually nice. The one thing I actually like about this update is the fact that you can see right here, they are adding new elements to Mario 3D World, since I really did feel like with Mario Maker 2, Mario 3D World was the least like fun one to actually make levels for, just because 3D World was one that didn't have a lot of assets. There really wasn't a lot to create with. But now with all these new things that they're adding to the 3D World theme in the game, you should be able to have more to do in a 3D World level, which is actually very nice, and that's something I'm actually very excited about. And then of course you do have the Koopalings here. All the Koopalings are back, so it'll make boss battles much more better if you want to recreate some old boss battles with the Koopalings. They all have their same attacks that you remember from all the past 2D Mario games. Overall, that's pretty much the minor things that are in this update. There is one pretty big update that's actually going to make a lot of people happy with this update. The nice thing about this update, they are making World Maker, and World Maker is going to be a pretty big game changer if you actually ask me, just because now instead of just making levels, you can actually make a full complete Mario game, which is actually pretty awesome. And I know some people out there probably wanted this, and honestly for me personally, I'm really glad this is in the game, because for one, I'm not really a big fan of just playing random levels, just because it's great to see what people are creating in Mario Maker, but just the fact that it doesn't feel like a real game that actually has like an end or a start kind of like makes me less excited to play that game, since I'm just playing levels at random. But now you can actually feel like you have like a game that has like a story around it, or has levels that are like similar to one another. Overall, it'll make you feel like you're actually playing a Mario game that Nintendo actually created instead of just random levels that you're playing one after another, and that actually makes me super excited. And it looks like there's a lot of depth to this world maker. You can see there's going to be you can create up to 40 levels in one game if you want to do that. There's going to be a whole bunch of different themes. There's going to be different things you can place around the world map, and overall this is very the best improvement I think Mario Maker should have had, because that was really the biggest problem with me playing the game. I got super bored just playing random people's levels and not really having a purpose to the game. So that's very nice, and that's pretty much this update for Mario Maker 2. Overall, it is some pretty nice stuff. They give us some new items here and there, and then of course the big overall arcing theme to this update, of course, was World Maker, and that's going to be very interesting. And this one does come out on 4/22, so April 22. As the time I'm making this video, of course, it's not April 22nd, so you will have to wait a little bit to get this update, but it's coming in the next couple of days, which should be exciting for a lot of people. And the nice thing I'm really glad about this update is I'm glad they actually decided to update the game one more time, just because I feel like some people may have gotten bored with the game and things like that. And honestly, I don't really hear too many people that I know personally talk about Mario Maker 2 anymore. It was fresh and new back when it came out on the Switch. A lot of people maybe never played the original Mario Maker, so it was nice that a lot of people got to experience Mario Maker. They added a whole bunch of things to the game, but now that the game's almost a year old, it's like, well, what can we do to actually get people more involved in the game and actually want to play the game again and talk about it again? Well, release this update. That's actually a pretty substantial update to Mario Maker 2, so that's actually very nice. And now the next one on my list is actually going to be about the brand new Animal Crossing New Horizons, because Animal Crossing New Horizons just got a brand new update, or is getting a brand new update, excuse me, which is going to be very interesting for that game, because I feel like even though a lot of people already have the game and a lot of people are already playing the game and enjoying the game, and there is quite a lot to do in that game. It's a game that technically never ends, since it's an open, it's like a sandboxy type game, an open world-esque sandbox game where you don't really have an end goal. You just live life every single day. You customize your island. You go to different shops in the game. You hang out with friends. That's pretty much the primary goal of Animal Crossing. A lot of people, since this game's already been out for a month, doesn't really have anything to do in the game, at least when it comes to major development on their island. They probably unlocked all the big things, and after you unlock all the big things in Animal Crossing, it kind of becomes a game where you start to maybe kind of get bored with the game, because every time you log into the game, you're not really getting new things that pop up in the game that are major, like buildings, major shops. So it is actually really nice that right now Nintendo did decide to update the game, or is updating the game in about a couple of days, just like Mario Maker. And let's talk about some of the things that they are actually adding to this brand new update. So you guys know Earth Day is literally right around the corner, and Earth Day is a pretty big deal in Animal Crossing. They've done this before in Animal Crossing. There's going to be a villager called Leaf that actually joins your island, and then you can buy things from him. The biggest thing, the nicest thing from Leaf is the fact that now you can get shrubs or you can get bushes in the game, and that's really going to change the way you actually customize your island. And I'm actually glad they are adding that, because it'll just make more islands prettier. It'll just make it overall better. Some people may be making mazes out of those. There's just a lot of things you could do with shrubs or with bushes in the game. And then of course Red is back, and Red has been a past villager in past Animal Crossing games, so it's not really new news to this game, since he is old just like Leaf. They showed earlier Leaf is old as well, but it is nice. He's going to sell all these shrubs. He's also going to sell all these like plants and flowers and things like that, which is actually nice. I also want to know for Leaf, is Leaf going to be one of those people just like CJ, just like Kix? Is he going to be a villager that just comes to your island every once in a while, or is he actually going to be a villager who has his own shop in the game? Because I think in the other one, I think New Leaf, he did have a shop. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. I can't really remember all too well, but it would be nice if he had his own shop, since we don't actually have too many shops in the game. We have the Nook's Cranny, and then we have the Able Sisters, and outside of that, we don't have anything else to visit, so it would give us more things to visit. I'm personally hoping he's not an NPC that just stops by your island like Kix. I hope he actually has his own shop in the game to give the game a little bit more variety and a little bit more things to visit. And I feel like this game, compared to past entries in Animal Crossing, didn't have as many doesn't have as many shops as the last games, or so you can't really make like a shopping district or like a little town if you want to make a little town based off of like shops and things like that. So let's please hope that's a thing. If it's not a thing, it's not that big a deal. It just means that you probably won't be seeing Leaf all the time, since if he's not having his own shop, it'll probably rotate with the other villagers that randomly come to your island who sell stuff like Kicks and things like that. And then of course we do have Red. We were talking about Red earlier, and Red will come to a random spot on your island. You can visit Red on the shore, I think, and it's going to be cool because he's going to be selling things for the museum. He's going to be selling paintings. He's going to be selling artwork and things like that, which is nice, and that's going to be the expansion to the museum. We are getting an artwork section, and I think the older games actually got an artwork section when it comes to Animal Crossing. This is not new. A lot of this stuff is just old returning stuff. It's kind of a shame. Also, I was really hoping for new things in the game that weren't actually part of Animal Crossing before, because we've already seen these things. But either way, it is free and it is nice. They're still continuing to grow and make Animal Crossing slightly better. One thing I'm not too happy about is the fact that it looks like from this update alone, it looks like this update is not going to be giving us any quality of life improvements that a lot of people actually want. It looks like they're just going to be giving us things to actually do in the game and actually see in the game. And it looks like all these updates are going to be updates all the way until I think the end of June. So they're showing us all these different like days, like Earth Day, I think May Day. They're gonna have one I think in June for wedding season, basically, so you can have you can marry villagers and kind of do like a little Happy Home Designer. If you ever played Happy Home Designer, you can customize like the church and customize their wedding, which is kind of a cool thing to do, I guess, if you're down for that. And yeah, that's pretty much all that's actually going to be in this update. One thing I did want to say about a lot of these things, a lot of the stuff in this update, like all the little events that are going on, like Wedding Day, Nature Day, May Day, and all that stuff, it really doesn't look like it's going to be as bad as something like Easter. You guys know how bad Easter was in Animal Crossing. So many eggs around, and a lot of times when you wanted to go fishing, when you wanted to hit rocks, when you wanted to pop balloons and everything like that, you kept seeing eggs everywhere. So I am actually very glad that Nintendo decided to actually, looks like there's not going to be too much to these updates, and they're not going to be that atrocive, and they're not really going to be bothering you all too much, which is actually very nice, because I was one of those people too, just like so many people who hated the eggs after a while. I was very tired of getting eggs so many times. Now the next one on my list is going to be about, of course, again, the Nintendo Switch. And let's talk about this because it is interesting. The Nintendo Switch is still on fire. It looks like the Nintendo Switch shells for March actually doubled from last year, and the Nintendo Switch is on a roll. And honestly, I'm not really too surprised. There's a number of reasons why that sales are probably up from last year. Let's go ahead and look at why the sales are up from last year. One reason the sales are up from last year, is the fact that, of course, this is the time that a new game came out, Animal Crossing New Horizons. So, of course, anytime a new game comes out for the Nintendo Switch, especially a big first-party title like Animal Crossing, of course, a lot of people are going to be excited to play the game. So, of course, more people are going to be buying Nintendo Switches. And on top of that, Animal Crossing does have one big caveat, which may have made more people want to buy the Nintendo Switch, to be honest, was the fact that Animal Crossing New Horizons is a game that you really can't play. You really can have multiple people playing the same Nintendo Switch and the same copy of the game. You really need people to have their own Nintendo Switch and their own copy of the game. And I would assume that would make a lot of people want to have multiple Switches for multiple family members with their own copy of new horizons, because that's the way the game's meant to be played. So maybe that's why there's a spike in sales for the Nintendo Switch. And then one big thing I do know for a factor, which is making a lot more people want to buy Switches nowadays than they ever did, was the fact that there is this whole crisis going around in the world right now. And of course, this crisis is keeping everybody at home. And since it's keeping everybody at home, of course, a lot of people are trying to go find things to do and stuff like that, since of course they are getting bored nowadays, since this whole stay-at-home protocol for a lot of people. So it makes sense they'd want to go out and buy a Nintendo Switch, and the Nintendo Switch makes sense more than other forms of entertainment, especially video games, just because you're not going to be tied down to one spot. Of course, you can take the Nintendo Switch anywhere, and it is the perfect companion, especially in the time that we actually live in, with this epidemic going around the world. So that really does make sense. But it's still pretty crazy that there's so many more Nintendo Switches being sold nowadays compared to a year ago. But like I said, it makes sense. Everything that's recently happening, and then the fact that a new game came out makes everybody want to buy one as fast as possible. And then let's talk about more news. So you guys know the Nintendo Switch, again, is at this point where it's really hard to find a Nintendo Switch, and a lot of people can't really find one as easily as they want to. Well, it looks like Nintendo is gonna try to be solving these issues alone. If you read this article right here, it does say Nintendo is reportedly ramping up Switch productions to meet demands, because everywhere you look, the Nintendo Switch is still out of stock. It's so bad that you can't even buy one right now. If you look at all your local retailers, whether it's GameStop, Walmart, Target, wherever you live, you just can't find a Nintendo Switch since they're so hard to find. That has to do with two main reasons. One reason is the fact that just a lot of people want the Switch now that we live in a time, like I said again, that we are in this epidemic, this bad situation around the world, and everyone's staying home. They just want something to do, and if you don't have a Switch, you want to buy a Switch. And then, of course, Animal Crossing is still a thing, and a lot of people still haven't got their hands on Animal Crossing, and they're trying to buy Animal Crossing and things like that. And then, of course, there is one big problem which is actually making Switches run out of stock really fast, is the fact that a lot of people are scalping Switches right now. And there's actually a program, believe it or not, there's actually a program that somebody made specifically for Nintendo Switch scalping. I know it's kind of a shady deal and a shady business practice to be doing something like this. But yes, basically someone made a program where anytime any of the major retailers around the world, or I think around America, actually gets a lot of Nintendo Switches in, it'll notify someone. And then once it notifies someone, they pretty much buy all the Nintendo Switches at the retailer, and then they resell them on eBay for hundreds and hundreds more dollars than what the retail prices of the Nintendo Switch. So for instance, if the Nintendo Switch, of course, is going for $300, they'll mark it up to like $700, $500 in a lot of different cases. And honestly, that's very shady business, reselling something that's still sold today on the market for a pretty reasonable price, and then marking it up to something like $500 to $700 is obviously not the right thing to do. And honestly, I'm not a big fan of that, and that's just not fair. And honestly, if I was the retailers, I would have something in place 100% sure, where if one person tries to order like 4 or 5 different copies of a Switch, I would probably say, no, you're probably scalping, so we're only going to limit one Nintendo Switch per customer. Or if you wanted multiple Switches, you would have to wait a little bit to get multiple Switches. Maybe you can only buy one a week or something like that to try to solve the whole scalping issue that's actually going on. With the combination of the scalping issue that's going on, and with people just wanting the Nintendo Switch in the time that we live in, it's really going to make for a bad time, which is actually unfortunate. And it looks like all the models are having problems, not just the regular Switch. You can see here from this picture, it looks like the regular Switch is having problems, but it's pretty much all Nintendo Switches as far as I'm aware, whether it's the Switch Lite or whether it's the original Switch or even the upgraded Switch, whatever you call all the Switches, basically are having a stock problem. But it makes sense, like I just said, which is kind of unfortunate, and I'm kind of not happy about what people are doing to the Nintendo Switch situation. And then this one is actually talking about the new iPad Pro. So you guys know that there was a brand new iPad Pro. I talked about it a lot on this YouTube channel, and this new iPad Pro is not really an upgrade to the 2018 iPad Pro. If you have the 2018 iPad Pro, there's really no reason at all to upgrade to this new one, because the performance is not too much faster. They just upgraded the GPU, but it's barely noticeable. The design's the same. Overall, it's exactly the same, so it'd be a waste of money for you to buy a brand new one over your 2018 iPad Pro. But this article specifically is still, they're still trying to answer the question, is the new iPad Pros replacing laptops or traditional computing? Because recently Apple did finally release their brand new Magic Keyboard for the brand new iPad Pros. I will say it looks very nice, this keyboard. The big difference between this keyboard and the last keyboard they make, it does have a trackpad on it, and they're trying to answer the question again, is the iPad Pro going to replace a traditional laptop in a sense? Should you buy something like a MacBook, or should you buy something like the iPad Pro? And it says the iPad is still an iPad even with the Magic Keyboard. And honestly, looking at this article, I do have to agree with them, because I really do think it still is an iPad for the most part. It's not really going to replace a laptop. Again, it will depend on your needs and what you're doing with a computer. Some people use computers just to like browse the internet, watch videos and things like that. So of course you could get away with doing stuff on an iPad. You can even do stuff on iPads that you wouldn't normally think is possible, like video editing, photo editing. If you need to do like schoolwork, like Word documents and things like that, you can get away with completely using the iPad for a lot of those different tasks. But for a lot of different tasks, it's still not going to replace a traditional laptop. So it's kind of hard to say, is the iPad is the iPad a laptop replacement? It just depends on what your needs are and what you need to do for your computing needs. It just depends. But I think for people who are trying to get some actual work done, unfortunately, I would probably say that this is still probably not the go-to solution, because there still is a lot of limitations. The biggest limitation with this whole setup, if you were to buy the iPad Pro and to buy this Magic Keyboard, is the cost of this thing. The cost of this thing is just crazy. I think this keyboard is like $300 or $400 plus the iPad Pro. The base iPad Pro is like $799. You calculate that up, I think you're already around the price of the base MacBook Air and things like that. So honestly, I would probably just get a MacBook Air instead of trying to get this whole setup, because you do have to realize with this Magic Keyboard, the Magic Keyboard is sold separately. It's not a piece that you can get with your iPad Pro. It doesn't come in the box, which is kind of unfortunate, especially since this Magic Keyboard is very expensive, plus the iPad Pro is very expensive. You're looking at around the same price as a traditional laptop like the MacBook Air, like I just said. And overall, it has a lot of limitations, and it still has a lot to be desired if you're trying to do actual work with this. Again, the biggest problem is it is a mobile OS. It's still iOS. Now, of course, they changed the name to iPad OS, but it's still a variation of iOS, so it's kind of still hard to say, well, you can get some real work done. But again, I want to make it clear, it depends on your needs and what you're looking to get out of a computer-esque device. Is this going to be a full-time product you can use every day and get away with using it as something like a laptop replacement, or do you need a full-on regular desktop OS that has a lot more features and can do a lot more and is also more powerful, because of course those ones have more power than something like the iPad Pro. But the iPad Pro, at least when it comes to the actual raw power of the actual device, it has a lot of power and it can do some pretty amazing things with this device. So don't think just because it's not an actual laptop it doesn't have a lot of horsepower. It definitely has a lot of power when it comes to compute power, and it is an amazing device, and it still is a nice device. The one thing that is going to be nice about this device is it is kind of like a hybrid device now if you bought the Magic Keyboard. So if you want to use it as kind of like a laptop replacement and then you wanted to use it as a regular tablet, you have both of those options. Unlike a traditional MacBook, of course, the MacBooks are all one piece with a hinge, so that means you're stuck in laptop mode all the time. And with this setup, if you could get away with something like this setup for your workflow and for what you need to do, this hands down would actually be a much more easier piece that'll actually be much more easier to travel with or to use, just because you can take it off the keyboard, you can hold it in your hands if you just want to like watch videos, browse the internet, but then if you need to get work done, you can place it on the Magic Keyboard. So it does have a lot of versatility, more so than a MacBook when it comes to actually portability ways, and just the ways you can use it, which is nice. And of course, don't forget, this thing does have one big key advantage that something like a MacBook actually doesn't have. It does have the Apple Pencil, and the Apple Pencil can actually be a game changer, of course, especially if you're a person that's an artist or need to do different things with a pencil. Maybe you're into landscaping and things like that, and you really need that pencil. Then of course, obviously, you're gonna need one of these devices at your disposal, of course, and that does make sense. You would probably want maybe look at this compared to something like a MacBook, just because MacBooks don't really have any touch input and don't really have a way to use something like a stylus, of course. But yeah, they honestly still have a long way to go, in my opinion, if you're trying to fully replace a laptop. But again, I keep having to make this super clear. It depends on your needs and what you need to do or get out of a computer. But yeah, it's very interesting. Also, it really does seem like every single year, as the years goes on, Apple keeps trying to claim it can replace their traditional laptops or replace laptops as a whole. And every year, honestly, it does seem like the iPad Pro is getting much more closer to replacing a laptop, but I still think it has a long way to go. So it's still going to be very interesting to see all the updates that iOS is going to be getting on the iPad, and then what type of accessories are they actually going to be giving the iPad to make it feel much more like a laptop replacement and things like that. So we'll have to wait and see. The way I see it is it's still going to get much more better in terms of getting more closer to a laptop replacement, but I don't think even with future updates it'll be totally there. What would actually be the purpose of making this thing so good it can do a lot of tasks that like the MacBooks could do? Because then what's the point of having the MacBook line, and what's the point of having the iPad Pro line? Because you're like, well, there is no difference now, and since the iPad is much more portable and much more lighter and thinner and things like that, and you can take it off the keyboard, I might as well buy a iPad Pro instead of a MacBook, just because it's much more thinner, lighter, and it has versatility with the pen. It has touch input. You can use the keyboard, that's something, of course, the MacBooks don't have. Of course, the MacBooks don't have anything like touch input. It's just strictly a keyboard and trackpad support. So yeah, very interesting, and I actually have to agree with this article wholeheartedly. At least from what I need and from what they're trying to say, I agree with them. The next one on my list is going to be about the NVIDIA streaming service, Geforce Now. I did use Geforce Now, and I honestly thought Geforce Now was flat out amazing. I liked everything about Geforce Now. I like the fact that it was, at least from the services I used, I thought it was very fluid, very nice. And the nice thing about it is you didn't even need your computer on if you wanted to play games. All you had to do is turn on whatever device you were using at the moment, even like a smartphone, and you can stream games from the cloud as long as you own them from like Steam, Epic Games, pretty much anywhere on those different clients on the PC. And what's very interesting about this is it does say NVIDIA streaming services keep losing more and more games, and that's really the biggest downside to this service. A lot of popular games are leaving from the service. Even though you own them, you can't use them on NVIDIA GeForce Now, which is actually very sad, and it's actually very disappointing, because I really like the performance of this thing. But what's the point of having a service if your game that you want to play is not on this service? And there is a lot of games that aren't compatible with this service. At one time, a lot of these games used to be compatible with this service, but basically what's going on with this service is the fact that a lot of these devs just don't want to actually comply with NVIDIA, because they're like, well, you're still in our game and you don't have any rights to let people stream our games. So they're forcing NVIDIA to take them off GeForce Now, which is actually insane if you think about it, just because they already got their money out of their game, because people have to buy their game before they can stream it on this platform. So it's not like they're having a subscription-based service where they're just somehow buying the games at a remote computer like on Steam, and then you're logging into someone else's Steam who already has all the games, and you're pretty much like getting a Netflix-esque experience. That's not how it works. Each individual user has to own the games before they can play it on Geforce Now, and I don't understand why devs are being greedy about this whole situation and not wanting NVIDIA to actually allow them to stream their games, because if you ask me personally, I really think it's good for PC gaming because it gives us more versatility. Of course, that means you can play your games almost anywhere on any device, and you don't need a powerful computer to actually play them. But on top of that, it also is good for the developers if you think about it, just because if the devs actually allow this, that means more people may be likely to buy their games on the PC instead of buying their game on something like a console if they have the option, because now you have something like game streaming, and if game streaming is allowed, they'll be like, well, we get a little bit more value out of buying our games on PC now that we can stream them. It's kind of like the Nintendo Switch, if you think about it. Some people want to buy their games on the Nintendo Switch, even if they're a downgraded version of a AAA game on another platform, just because, well, they're getting less performance, but just the fact they have they're pretty much paying for two copies of the game, a game that they can play on the TV and a game they can take on the go. And for a lot of people, that's actually a really big incentive to actually buy their third-party games on the Nintendo Switch and a lot of their indie games on the Nintendo Switch. So honestly, I just don't see why so many devs are trying to be greedy and trying to stop NVIDIA from actually allowing them to stream their games, because I would honestly think either way it's a win-win scenario for a lot of these big developers, and it is just a shame. Now it's almost to the point where so many games are leaving, it's almost like, why even sign up for this service? Because if you didn't know anything about NVIDIA Geforce Now, which I had used, there is actually a pretty big limitation in play. One is you do have to pay for it. That's really the biggest limitation. You can get the service for free and actually play it, but you only get an hour's worth of gameplay, and then after that it does actually lock you out, which is actually pretty disappointing, and honestly, obviously, that's not actually good. So if you have to pay for a service where a lot of games are disappearing, why would you pay for that? You're better off for looking at different alternatives to play your games remotely and things like that. That's just how it goes. It looks like Oxygen not included, Middle-earth: Shadow of War, and the entire Arkham series are going to be pulled from Geforce Now on April 24th. And those are some actually big blockbuster games. I think I've heard of Oxygen not included. I don't know if it's that big, but definitely Middle-earth: Shadow of War is a pretty big game, and a very good game at that. So it's kind of bad that game's going. And then of course losing all the Batman games, which you guys know most of the Batman games are all the Batman games, at least the Arkham games are actually extremely good games. So that's kind of disappointing that those games are leaving the platform. At least with a lot of these games that they have on this list, they're not multiplayer games, or they're not fairly new games. A lot of these are a little bit older games, so maybe you've already played these games in the past, but if you wanted to play these games on the go and revisit them, or whatever the case may be, on April 24th, you are going to lose access to these games. And this isn't the first time that games have been off of this service. I think some of the Call of Duty games were off of this service. Overwatch is off of this service. There's a list of just different games. You can look up a list. And there were some games that weren't supported in the first place. And there's actually quite a few games, and you may have to look and dig around and see what games are supported and what games are not supported to see if you actually want to get invested in this service alone. That's really the biggest downside. But when it comes to the actual service itself, it's really a shame, since, like I said, this service is a service that I've had no problems with. I love the performance out of it. It was amazing to me. It really did, on my connection, feel like I was actually playing the game on my desktop computer locally instead of playing it from the cloud. I was actually pretty blown away by the experience, but now I guess that experience is going to be going away even more, just because more games keep leaving this service overall. And yeah, that's going to do it for this episode. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.